Fine rain beats against the windows of the old building on Wilhelmstrasse in Berlin. Inside, maps cover the walls, telephones never stop ringing, lights stay on deep into the night. A man in a gray uniform, almost forgotten by history, moves between tables piled with secret reports. He doesn't fire a shot, doesn't command tanks, doesn't step into trenches. Even so, the decisions he makes in that room can sink ships, bring down planes, and decide the deaths of thousands of people in a matter of hours. This is the invisible side of the war. Nazi intelligence. Before the world plunged into the chaos of the Second World War, Hitler's regime already understood an uncomfortable truth. Without information, there is no real power. That is why, in parallel with the rearmament of the army, Nazi Germany fed a machine of espionage and counter-espionage that had begun back in the Weimar Republic, with the military intelligence service known as the Abwehr. Officially created in 1920, inside the Ministry of Defense, the agency was born to defend the country from foreign spies, but soon began operating abroad as well, collecting military and political information for the German state. Wikipedia. When Hitler rises to power in 1933, this structure gains a new meaning. War stops being a hypothesis and becomes a project. The Abwehr is placed under the command of an experienced admiral, Wilhelm Canaris, an enigmatic man who, in public, serves the regime, but in private will have an increasingly ambiguous relationship with the Führer himself. Meanwhile, a second force grows in the shadows, the Sicherheitsdienst, or SD, the security service of the SS, commanded by Reinhard Heydrich, one of the most fanatical and cruel figures in the Nazi inner circle. The SD, initially linked to the Nazi Party, soon becomes a central arm of surveillance, repression, and political and racial persecution, and also operates in espionage. Encyclopedia.ushmm.org. Two intelligence services, two worlds, a single totalitarian state. On one side, the Abwehr, more traditional, tied to the military. On the other, the SD, ideological, violent, radical. Between them, rivalry, intrigue, and a constant struggle for influence with Hitler. Meanwhile, the war has not yet exploded. But no one knows that, behind the apparent stability in Europe, an almost invisible web is already being woven. Nazi agents try to infiltrate German communities abroad, monitor left-wing movements, map ports, railways, industries, and sea routes. In embassies, consulates, front companies, and pockets of the German diaspora, reports are quietly sent to Berlin, feeding an ever-growing archive on the rest of the world. Cryptomuseum.com. When Germany invades Poland in 1939, the world sees tanks, Stuka dive bombers, columns of infantry advancing. But behind the image of the perfect blitzkrieg, there is something else. The dangerous and seductive sense that the Nazis always know where to attack, when to strike, and how to disrupt the enemy even before the first shot. Meanwhile, inside the planning offices of the German High Command, intelligence reports are laid out on the table. They help indicate where defenses are weakest, which officers are considered incompetent, which countries are more isolated diplomatically, which societies are more polarized and vulnerable to propaganda. The Nazi machine was not limited to movie spies. It combined four pillars: classical espionage, human agents in other countries, infiltrated as diplomats, businessmen, journalists, field military intelligence, units at the front collecting prisoners, documents, maps, and reports, signals intelligence, interception of radio communications, telegraphy, and enemy codes, internal terror, surveillance, denunciation, and coercion of the German population and of occupied territories. All this gave Germany the feeling that it could anticipate every move of its adversaries. At many moments early in the war, that confidence was not just arrogance. It was backed by concrete results. In a closed room of a discrete building, technicians of the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, lean over long strips of paper covered with signals and numbers. These are coded messages, intercepted in the Atlantic. Here, one of the most dangerous branches of Nazi intelligence is born. B-Dienst, the naval cryptology service responsible for trying to break the codes of the British Navy. While the Allies fought desperately to decipher the famous Enigma machine used by the Germans, B-Dienst was taking the opposite path, trying to understand the codes used to protect the convoys that brought food, fuel, and weapons to the United Kingdom. And for quite some time, it succeeded. Historical research indicates that, for a good part of the war, especially up to 1943, German cryptanalysts had significant successes in breaking versions of the so-called naval cipher No. 3, a code used by the British to protect communications about convoy routes. Wikipedia. The impact is brutal. When a convoy leaves eastern Canada or the United States, bound for Great Britain, carrying grain, oil, ammunition, and men, German submarines already know, with a good degree of accuracy, where and when the most vulnerable ships will be. In the darkness of the Atlantic, U-boats wait like patient hunters. Many attacks that seemed like mere luck were, in fact, the result of privileged information obtained by breaking codes. In other words, during a critical period of the war, Nazi Germany was reading part of the internal life of the enemy fleet. That was not enough to defeat Britain, but it came close to breaking its logistical backbone. Meanwhile, inside Germany, another form of intelligence was being developed: the systematic analysis of field reports. The Army's intelligence sections, such as Fremde Heere Ost, Foreign Armies East, were responsible for studying the military potential of enemies like the Soviet Union. The function was simple in theory: to transform a chaos of information into predictions about what the enemy could or could not do. In practice, however, this system had a problem that would prove fatal: ideological pressure. According to studies on the work of Fremde Heere Ost, the reports often gravely underestimated the Soviet capacity for reorganization, industrialization, and counterattack, repeating racial and political prejudices of the Nazi regime itself. Perspectivia.net. In other words, a powerful intelligence apparatus in technical means, but gradually contaminated by something that corrodes any serious analysis: the urge to please the boss. While the world watched the swift victories of the Wehrmacht in Poland, Norway, and France, another type of intelligence was consolidating: Nazi power in the rear. Internal surveillance. The Sicherheitsdienst, SD, tied to the SS, was not just an information service. It was part of the very mechanism of political persecution, brutality, and genocide. Centered on radical ideological principles, the SD monitored opponents: Jews, communists, minorities, religious leaders, and anyone deemed unreliable. Encyclopedia.ushmm.org. Detailed reports on the mood of the population in occupied cities and in Germany itself fed decisions on repression, executions, deportations, and reprisals. Here, intelligence did not serve only to win battles, but to maintain, through terror, a model of totalitarian society. Meanwhile, in the occupied territories, local informants were coerced, bought, or blackmailed. The SD and the Gestapo used networks of collaborators to identify resistance leaders, weapons caches, clandestine radios. The objective was simple: to break the enemy's ability to organize, even before the resistance could gain momentum. For the Nazi machine, information was both a weapon and a shackle. Between 1940 and 1942, it is easy to see why many inside the regime believed that German intelligence was almost infallible. The invasion of France was preceded by intense reconnaissance and analysis, which helped identify weak points in the famous Maginot Line and exploit the terrain of the Ardennes, seen by many French generals as impracticable for a large armored advance. At the beginning of Operation Barbarossa, in 1941, Germany had accumulated detailed information on the geography, infrastructure, and overall disposition of Soviet forces, though mixed with dangerous illusions. In the Atlantic, U-boats, supported by signals intelligence, appeared to have turned the ocean into an almost perfect trap for Allied convoys. Wikipedia. From the point of view of an officer in Berlin, the signs were clear. The enemies made mistakes, arrived late, underestimated the threat, and always reacted a step behind. Confidence exploded, and with it, the main strategic error of any intelligence service, believing that the other side is permanently in the dark. What no one in Berlin knew was that, on the other side of the English Channel, inside discreet mansions and anonymous buildings, a silent revolution was underway. The British were not only breaking codes and building counter-espionage networks, but also learning to exploit, surgically, the weaknesses of Nazi intelligence. Army Press, Army, Mill. What happened next shocked both sides. Every espionage machine depends on two things: collecting as much information as possible, and then interpreting that information correctly. It is here that Nazi intelligence begins to move dangerously close to its own downfall. On one side, there were technically competent services, such as B-Dienst, capable of breaking enemy codes efficiently. On the other, analytical structures under pressure from a regime that did not tolerate bad news, doubts, or questions. Many reports were filtered to fit Hitler's worldview and that of his most fanatical generals. Meanwhile, the Allies began to notice a pattern. German intelligence might be strong in numbers, but weak in self-criticism. This flaw would be exploited on a large scale when the British launched strategic deception operations, such as the one that would mislead the German High Command about the location of the Allied landings in France. Later studies show that the deception operation known as Fortitude only worked so well because it found an intelligence system that was overly confident and trapped in its own beliefs about the enemy. Army Press, Army, Mill. But that is a subject for the next part. For now, we are left with this image. Berlin, early 1940 seconds. In a closed room, officers are bent over maps, red arrows advancing on multiple fronts. Reports arrive stamped urgent, secret, highly confidential. Someone comments that the enemy is disoriented, incapable of reacting, politically weak. The room agrees. No one wants to be the first to suggest that the picture might be wrong. Outside, the war goes on. In the holds of Allied ships, radios transmit messages that the Germans believe they fully understand. In occupied territories, informants feed the surveillance machine with names, addresses, and suspicions. On the Eastern Front, reports once again underestimate the Soviet capacity to resist. According to historical records, Nazi intelligence was, for a time, one of the most aggressive and far-reaching in the world. But its greatest secret, ironically, was not the codes it broke, but the error it had yet to see, the blindness produced by its own ideology and arrogance. And that error, combined with the silent counterattack of Allied espionage networks, would transform an intelligence system that once seemed almost invincible into a case study of how to lose a war, even while knowing so much. Low light, cigarette smoke, whispered voices, in German, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian. We are not in Berlin. We are in a discreet cafe in Lisbon, 1941. At a table, a supposed German trade representative talks with a Brazilian coffee importer. Between cups and fake invoices, small envelopes pass back and forth with ship numbers, departure dates, and stops in neutral ports. This is the war being fought far from the battlefields, in territories officially at peace. Behind these meetings, there was a structure planned with cold precision. The Abwehr, the German military intelligence service, was not just an office in Berlin. It spread through regional stations called Abwehrstellen, AST, with subdivisions for espionage, sabotage, and counterintelligence in each military district. From headquarters, under Admiral Wilhelm Canaris, orders were sent to a network of agents and informants spread across Europe, Latin America, the Middle East, and beyond. Wikipedia. Officially, Canaris served the regime. In practice, he was an ambiguous figure, a Navy veteran, experienced in secret operations since the First World War, conservative, nationalist, but increasingly distrustful of Hitler's madness. Even as he helped build espionage networks, he kept discreet contacts with circles opposed to the Führer, and at certain moments, sabotaged decisions of the regime itself. National Security Agency. But moral ambiguity did not cancel technical effectiveness. During the first years of the war, Nazi intelligence operated with a frankly frightening level of coordination on several fronts. Before and during the war, the Abwehr established operations centers in embassies, legations, and consulates, especially in neutral countries such as Spain, Portugal, Switzerland, and several Latin American nations. In cities like Madrid, Lisbon, Rio de Janeiro, and Buenos Aires, agents operated under diplomatic, commercial, or journalistic cover. National Security Agency. These centers collected information on the movements of merchant and warships, news on the supply of strategic raw materials such as iron ore, oil, and rubber, reports on local political trends and potential sympathizers of the Axis or the Allies, rumors about secret negotiations, alliances, and changes of government. In some cases, clandestine radio operators connected directly to Berlin using their own codes. The goal was clear: to turn the planet into a giant map of resource flows and political decisions, in which Germany tried to anticipate every move. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Atlantic, the Kriegsmarine was still reaping the rewards of combining this human intelligence network with the work of B-Dienst, the naval cryptology service that had broken important British naval codes, especially the Naval Combined Cipher No. 3, used in convoy communications in the North Atlantic. Wikipedia. The result? Often when a convoy left Halifax or New York bound for Britain, the German High Command already had a fairly accurate idea of its route, speed, and size. U-boats were positioned like moving traps in the middle of the ocean. For many officers in Berlin, the impression was that the enemy sailed almost blind. But if, far from the fighting, Germany seemed to have eyes everywhere, in the heart of its most important enemy, the reality was far less glorious. From the beginning of the conflict, the Third Reich tried to infiltrate spies into Great Britain to observe ports, airfields, troop movements, industrial facilities, and, interestingly, British weather, which was crucial to planning air and naval operations. They were sent by boat, submarine, parachute, or via routes through neutral countries. Spyculture.com. According to historical records and now declassified documents, virtually all of these agents sent to the island were quickly captured by British counterintelligence, MI5. Some were poorly trained, spoke weak English, carried suspicious equipment, or made basic mistakes as soon as they arrived. Then something happened that would change the course of the secret war. Instead of simply executing or imprisoning them, the British created the double-cross system. The captured agents were given a brutal choice: die by firing squad, or work as double agents, sending controlled information back to Germany. The overwhelming majority chose to live. Wikipedia. Under the supervision of a committee known as the 20 Committee, because of the Roman numeral XX, symbol of double cross, MI5 began to monitor every message sent to the Germans, mix in true information, to maintain the trust of the controllers in Berlin, insert at decisive moments critical distortions that would alter the Nazi perception of reality, spotter up. In practice, the Nazi intelligence machine believed it was receiving reports from a valuable network of agents on British soil. But that network, for the most part, had been hijacked and turned into an instrument of deception. Meanwhile, the Germans remained confident that they knew everything about what was going on in the United Kingdom. That was exactly what the British wanted. In the middle of this shadow war, the Atlantic remained an existential battlefield. If the convoys were stopped, Britain could literally starve and run out of fuel. For a time, the sense was that the German Navy, driven by B-Dienst information and U-boat action, had the situation under control. But the balance began to shift. On one side, German intelligence underestimated how quickly the British and Americans would improve their own codes, started introducing new cipher systems, and most importantly, began reading more and more German traffic thanks to the capture of Enigma machines and manuals, and the tireless work at Bletchley Park, Wikipedia. On the other, Bedienst saw its successes dwindle as the British changed their cipher systems. When Naval Cipher No. 5 came into use in 1943, the German ability to accurately track convoys plummeted. Wikipedia. From then on, U-boats not only found fewer targets, they also increasingly became the hunted rather than the hunters, thanks to a combination of improved radar, too long-range air cover, aggressive Allied intelligence operations based on deciphering German codes. For those looking at the maps in Berlin, the war still appeared to be balanced. But, quietly, the information advantage was starting to change hands. If at sea, the game was becoming ever more technical. On the Eastern Front, the problem of German intelligence was deeper and more deeply rooted. Charged with studying Soviet military potential, the service known as Fremde Heer Ost, Foreign Armies East, had the mission of producing cold analyses of the Red Army: size, reserves, industrial capacity, morale, doctrine, and its ability to rebuild after losses. In theory, it was classic general staff work. In practice, it ran into three fatal barriers: racial and ideological underestimation of the adversary. The Nazi leadership saw the Soviets as inferior, which tainted the interpretation of any data. Political pressure. Reports that were too pessimistic or contradicted Hitler's expectations were often ignored, rewritten, or downplayed. Difficulty in grasping Soviet mobilization capacity, both in human and industrial terms, including the mass transfer of factories to the east. According to recent studies on Fremde Heer Ost, this combination led to systematically erroneous assessments of how much the Soviet Union could still endure. Even after the catastrophic losses of 1,941,942. Perspectivia.net. Meanwhile, reality at the front was showing something else. The Soviet Union quickly rebuilt destroyed units. The production of tanks, aircraft, and artillery rose to levels that German intelligence had not clearly foreseen. Operations such as Stalingrad and Kursk exposed the difference between what the reports suggested and what the war, in practice, delivered. Nazi intelligence, which at the beginning seemed to have given Germany a decisive advantage, was starting to show cracks. Information was still being collected in large volumes, but the decision-making process was increasingly hostage to Hitler's will. When a country's leadership only listens to what it wants to hear, even the best spy network in the world becomes useless. While the East burned and the Atlantic grew ever more dangerous, a high-risk struggle was quietly unfolding in the West, the preparation for the Allied invasion of occupied Europe. The Nazis knew that sooner or later a major landing would come. The question was, where? The eyes of German intelligence turned to the most logical point on the map: the strait between Dover and Pas de Calais, the narrowest part of the English Channel. Everything indicated that the main attack would come from there. It was precisely this assumption that the Allies decided to exploit with ruthless skill. Thus was born Operation Fortitude, part of a broader strategic deception plan. Bodyguard, its most famous arm, Fortitude South, had a clear goal: to convince the German High Command that the main landing would be in Calais, and that any attack on Normandy would be just a distraction. Wikipedia. To do this, the Allies created a phantom army in the Kent and Sussex region, the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, SUSAG, supposedly under the command of the charismatic General George Patton. Dummy camps, with inflatable tanks, wooden aircraft, stage prop trucks, and empty facilities visible from the air. Simulated radio traffic, with messages carefully staged to indicate intense preparations in that region. A continuous flow of information fed by who? By the very double agents controlled by MI5, those same spies whom Berlin believed were working for the Abwehr with absolute dedication. Encyclopedia Britannica. Among them, one name stood out: Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, an anti-fascist Spaniard he convinced the Germans that he commanded a vast network of informants in Britain. In reality, this network was entirely fictional, assembled in offices in London with British support. Even so, Berlin trusted him so much that he was awarded a military decoration, Encyclopaedia Britannica. Meanwhile, in Germany, intelligence analysts were receiving various reports. Aerial reconnaissance showed signs of troops in southern England. Reliable agents reported massive preparations to attack Calais. Basic general staff logic pointed to the shortest crossing of the Channel. The puzzle seemed to fit perfectly. That was exactly the trap. When D-Day came, on 6 June 1944, and Allied troops landed on the beaches of Normandy, many in the high command still believed that this was a secondary operation. For weeks, Hitler and some of his generals resisted sending heavy reinforcements to the region, convinced that the real attack would still come in Calais. Encyclopaedia Britannica. In simple terms, the Nazi intelligence system, once so feared, was swallowed by its own certainty. Fortitude would not have worked without the Allied deception structure, but it would not have had the same impact if German intelligence had not been overconfident in its sources, accustomed to viewing the enemy as predictable, conditioned to deliver analyses to Hitler that confirmed his expectations. That mistake prolonged the lives of German soldiers stuck in Calais, but hastened the end of the war for the Third Reich. From advantage to ruin, the intelligence that almost won and lost itself. If we look at the whole picture, the image is paradoxical. At the beginning of the war, Germany broke British naval codes with obedience. Wikipedia had a structured military espionage network through the Abwehr. Wikipedia maintained stations in neutral countries and gathered sensitive information on several continents. National Security Agency built an internal totalitarian surveillance system with the SD and the Gestapo. JSTOR possessed analytical services like Fremde Heerost, theoretically capable of assessing enemy potential. JSTOR. For a time, this combination gave the Third Reich a real advantage. Ships were sunk, enemy operations were anticipated, diplomatic moves were monitored. But as the war dragged on, the internal flaws of the machine began to exact a price. Institutional fragmentation. Each branch, Army, Navy, Luftwaffe, SS, maintained its own structures, sometimes barely cooperative, as studies on the multiplicity of German cryptographic agencies show. Wikipedia. 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 Growing political interference, especially from Himmler and the SS, eroding the independence of the Abwehr. Ideological pressure, which contaminated intelligence reports, especially regarding the Soviet Union. Perspectivia.net. Inability to realize that its espionage network in the United Kingdom was completely compromised, turned into a weapon against Germany itself. Wikipedia. In the end, Nazi intelligence illustrates a hard and enduring lesson. It is not enough to collect information. You have to know how to doubt it. For a brief period, the Third Reich had a real chance to turn information into strategic victory, especially in the Atlantic and in the early phase of the war in the East. But it failed to sustain that advantage against an enemy that learned quickly, infiltrated its spy network, broke its codes, and exploited its psychological blind spots. In the last months of the war, with Berlin encircled, many of these intelligence services were in collapse. Archives were burned, agents tried to flee, others switched sides and cooperated with the future victors. Secrets carefully accumulated over years would soon become bargaining chips in the new world that was emerging, the world of the Cold War. But that belongs to the next chapter. Lights go out in Berlin. Files burn in cramped basements. Officers tear pages, destroy codes, try to erase the traces of years of secret war. It is 1945. The Third Reich is falling apart. But as the regime collapses, its secrets become the most coveted prize on the planet. Columns of prisoners march through defeated Germany. Allied soldiers enter destroyed cities, silent factories, abandoned bases. Amid ruins and mud, they are not only looking for weapons, they are looking for brains, machines, archives, codes, specialists. While ordinary citizens try to survive the end of the war, a parallel race begins. A race to capture everything Nazi intelligence built. According to declassified records, even before Germany's total surrender, the Allies created a secret group with a specific mission: to locate and seize everything that remained of German signals, intelligence structures, especially their cryptology centers, documents, and technicians. The codename, TICOM, Target Intelligence Committee. Wikipedia. TICOM teams advanced right behind combat troops with lists of targets, radio interception stations, communications traffic analysis centers, Luftwaffe, Army, and Navy offices dedicated to signals intelligence. Archives containing minutes of meetings, interception reports, technical manuals, Internet Archive. In some cases, teams arrived literally hours before Soviet units or other allies, in a silent race over who would keep the technical core of the Reich. Later reports show the scale of what was captured. Documents detailing how German interception units functioned. Records of how the Wehrmacht and the Luftwaffe monitored Soviet, British, and other enemy communications. Internet Archive. Lists of highly specialized personnel in cryptology, radio, and traffic analysis. These data would no longer serve to defeat Hitler. They would now serve another purpose: to prepare the next war, the one arising against the Soviet Union. Meanwhile, in the United Kingdom and the United States, analysts began comparing what the Germans actually knew with what the Allies had imagined they knew. The picture is uncomfortable. Germany had, in several moments, a more organized signals intelligence structure than previously thought. At the same time, it failed to turn all this into strategic victory. Wikipedia. Even in defeat, the Nazi machine still had value, and no one wanted to share that value with the other side. Among the thousands of captured officers, one name emerged as central on the new chessboard: Reinhard Gehlen. During the war, Gehlen had been the head of Fremde Heerost, the military intelligence service responsible for analyzing the Red Army and the Eastern Front. His unit assembled field reports, prisoner interrogations, intercepts, maps, and logistical data to try to predict Soviet fighting capacity. Perspectivia.net. Gehlen's reports failed at critical points, especially by underestimating Soviet resilience. Even so, the body of information he had accumulated on the USSR over the years was enormous. When German defeat becomes inevitable, Gehlen makes a calculated decision. Instead of disappearing, he negotiates his knowledge as currency of entry into the new world. He surrenders to US forces, bringing microfilm reels hidden in containers buried in the Alps, the mental organogram of his former network of sources and analysts, the promise that he can rebuild a service focused exclusively on the enemy of the future, the Soviet Union. ES6002008.us.archive.org. In secret meetings at Fort Hunt, in the United States, Gehlen convinces American officers that A. He knows Soviet military structures like few others. B. He can reactivate his old contacts in the East. C. He is more useful, alive, and active than as just another prisoner. Warfare History Network. The result is one of the most controversial alliances of the Cold War. With financial support and protection from the United States, the Gehlen Organization is created in 1946, an intelligence service composed mostly of former members of Fremde Heerost and other German officers, some with very dark pasts in the Nazi regime. Wikipedia. Its mission: to spy on the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, passing information directly to the Americans. Later, this organization would become the basis of West Germany's foreign intelligence service, the BND, Bundesnachrichtendienst. Wikipedia. Meanwhile, families of Nazi victims were barely beginning to bury their dead, and former Third Reich intelligence officers were being recycled as indispensable experts in the new global conflict. This is the brutal logic of power politics. Those who have data survive. Those who have archives re-enter the game. Gehlen was not the only one to have his past reclassified in the name of the new order. In parallel, the United States put into practice a program that would become famous decades later: Operation Paperclip. Officially, it was an operation to recruit German scientists, engineers, and technicians to work on military, aerospace, and technological projects in the USS. According to records, more than 1,600 specialists were brought from Germany to the United States between 1945 and the late 1952, many with histories of Nazi Party membership or involvement in regime programs. Wikipedia.10. Names like Wernher von Braun, linked to the development of the V-2 rockets, are usually the most remembered. But American interest was not limited to rockets. Research in advanced aeronautics, ResearchGate, high altitude and space medicine, CIA, materials engineering, techniques for producing sophisticated weapons. All of this was absorbed, adapted, and transferred to laboratories and bases in the US. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union was doing the same thing, on another scale, and with a different strategy, taking German scientists, engineers, and technicians to work on its own rocket, aircraft, and weapons programs. National World War II Museum. The message was clear. The Reich's knowledge would not die with the Reich. It would be reused, repackaged, and used to feed the next phase of global competition. And, as always, the line between strategic gain and moral compromise grew ever more blurred. When documents began to be released decades later, the public could finally see more clearly the size of the concessions made by Western powers by integrating ex-Nazis into their intelligence and research systems. U.S. government records and later investigations show that the Gehlen organization employed several former regime members, including people involved in war crimes or repressive structures in the East. Archive 2.gw.edu. Many scientists brought over by Operation Paperclip had highly problematic pasts, including work in programs that exploited slave labor in concentration camps. Wikipedia. Intelligence authorities sometimes downplayed or hid this information in the name of strategic necessity. Next, times2.gu.edu. Meanwhile, Holocaust. Survivors and other Nazi victims fought for recognition, justice, and memory, often without knowing that some of the men who had helped sustain the regime were employed, protected, and well paid in the new Cold War world. This is where the theme of this documentary reaches its most uncomfortable point. Nazi secrets were not only revealed, they were, to a large extent, absorbed, normalized, and reused. What began as an intelligence system that nearly gave the Reich a decisive advantage ended up as part of the global architecture of espionage, military research, and technological power in dissenter. The second half of the 20th century. Legacy. What is left of Nazi intelligence today? If we strip away the propaganda, the myth, and the horror, what remains, historically speaking, of the Nazi intelligence system? A technical warning. Germany showed the power of integrating human espionage, communications interception, traffic analysis, and internal surveillance into a relatively efficient machine, especially early in the war. The way it structured its networks, interception stations, and agencies like B-Dienst did indeed influence the later development of modern intelligence services. Scribd. A political warning. The same Germany showed how technically strong intelligence can be destroyed by ideology. Reports filtered to please Hitler, distorted analyses of the Soviet Union, systematic contempt for the enemy, refusal to accept bad news. All this turned a powerful reported network into a sandcastle. Perspectivia.net. A moral warning. The post-war use of ex-Nazis in intelligence services and scientific projects in the US and Western Europe shows just how far states are willing to go when the issue is power and strategic advantage. The revelations about Gehlen, Paperclip, and similar programs raise a deeply uncomfortable question. To what extent are democratic societies willing to compromise their values in the name of security? Archive2.gwi.edu. A human warning. Behind acronyms, organograms, and files, there were people. officers, analysts, cryptographers, radio operators, informants, some fanatics, others opportunists, a few trying to sabotage from within, like Canaris at certain moments, all trapped in a structure that mixed technical skill with a genocidal political project. Digital Commons, Chapman.edu. Meanwhile, today's world is surrounded by cameras, satellites, wiretaps, digital surveillance, and massive data collection. Much has changed since 1945, but the central logic remains. Information is power. The difference is that now the line between war and peace is even more blurred. Intelligence operations no longer wait for formal declarations of war. They happen every day, in real time, across networks, cables, servers, markets, elections. Nazi secrets have been, to a large extent, emptied, studied, and absorbed. The machines that deciphered codes have been replaced by infinitely more powerful algorithms. The agents who crossed borders by ship or train have been replaced by malware, fake profiles, and disinformation campaigns. But the central lesson of history still stands. An intelligence system that ignores reality to please the leader is doomed. An intelligence system that despises its enemy creates room for fatal error. An intelligence system disconnected from any ethical limit may win battles, but corrodes the very meaning of victory. In the end, Nazi intelligence almost gave the Third Reich decisive advantages at key moments of the Second World War. In the Atlantic, in the early Eastern Front, in the occupation of Europe. Almost, it was defeated by the Allies' ability to learn, adapt, and deceive, by the regime's own internal vices, by its refusal to hear bad news, and its blind belief in its own superiority. Today, most of the archives are open. Historians can reconstruct charts, organograms, reports, statistics, but what matters most are not the numbers. They are the choices. Between maps and microfilms, basement archives and interrogation rooms, the history of Nazi intelligence is, in the end, a massive warning. When knowledge mixes with fanaticism and technical skill, kneels before ideology, the result is not lasting strength, it is collapse. And the secrets that almost won the Second World War end up serving not as a model, but as a warning.